Welcome to Team DataFam Tableau User Group meeting number 39. This tug works a little bit differently to a few other tugs, made for more the presenter rather than the audience. So we meet at a whole different set of times on different days of the week, etc., to capture the best presentations from around the world. Today we've got a repeat from TC24, which is always good. But if you want to present, please email me. My email is team.datafam@gmail.com. There's always slots available. We try and meet every week. We've got TC25 presentations coming up. We've also got a Visit Sydney presentation in a few weeks' time. As I said, if you want to present on anything, please let me know, or anything Tableau related, please let me know. We'll find a slot for you. So today we've got Scott talking about documenting your dashboard, the why, how, and what about documentation, and obviously why it's important, and it even might be important for the future you. But I'll hand it over to Scott and he can take it from there and show us what documentation is good for.
All right, thank you all for having me today here. Really am passionate about this topic. It's maybe not the sexiest subject in the world to talk about, but for me, it's what I call a necessary evil. In any role I've had, it's something I like to do, but it's something that's been necessary. So I hope you guys get a lot of value out of this and understanding, okay, why dashboard documentation is important, how to document it, and what you should have in the templates that you use. So a little bit of information about my name is Scott Eaton. I'm a data visualization manager at JP Chase. I have worked in the data visualization field for 19 years, and I've worked in Tableau for 13 of those. I am a two-time Tableau user group ambassador, second time for 2025. So happy to kind of have that distinction again for this year. I am also a co-lead of the DataFam Career Path Makers user group and the Central Hire user groups. Personal about myself, my favorite sports teams are the Cleveland Browns and the Ohio State Buckeyes. I'm a huge American football fan. My favorite TV franchise is Track, and my favorite franchise in that show is Deep Space Nine. And I am a little bit of a nerd when it comes to Star Trek and a little bit of a data geek. Last year when they had the movies challenges last year, or in Data Plus TV, I did my first kind of dashboards outside of work. So if you go on my Tableau public portfolio, you'll see kind of my first two attempts at that. So I created a dashboard around the 15 acts I've played Captain of the Enterprise. Not my best work, but a good start. And then I entered my second one into the Iron Viz qualifier last year. Did not make the top 10, but I thought it was pretty good to start on there. And that was just around Star Trek episode ratings. So definitely go out and check those out. I also, as far as a geek that I am of Star Trek, I started watching it when I was 16. And the reason I love the field that I'm in and the storytelling aspect of it is when I started watching Deep Space Nine, that was the first Star Trek franchise to have an overarching story arc span multiple seasons. And that story arc kept me really invested in the characters and the story, and really kept me drawn in, and they continue to kind of follow that model through all the present day iterations of Star Trek. And that's just continued to foster my love of storytelling and really got me started down that road. And just a fun fact in relation to that, about 10 years ago, I created a Excel spreadsheet which has the list of every episode and movie comic canon to Star Trek across every franchise in the proper chronological order by viewing date. And right now it's about north of 900 episodes, and I've been through in the last 10 years, watching everything in the proper order. So that's how much of a geek I am when it comes to Star Trek. So again, data nerd into me as it relates to Star Trek. One day, put a comprehensive Tableau dashboard on top of all that information for anybody who's the franchise. And then finally, my favorite video game franchises are Horizon and Assassin's Creed, just from the fact I'm huge into story-driven games and movies and things like that, which again feeds into the career that I lead and telling a story and telling good stories are a huge part of that. So that's why I love those franchises. All right, so again, this is a repeat of my talk from TC24. So what we're going to talk about today is first, why should you document your dashboard? What is the importance of having that documentation in place? Then next, how do you document your dashboard? What are the kind of the tools you need to be able to kind of get that documentation in place? And then what should be in your documentation template? So I'll kind of lay out the sections and the things in those sections that should be in your template. And then finally, I'm going to do a quick little screenshot demo of a tool called RapidDocs, which is an automated tool I found to help make that process easier. And it took, for a good majority of my career, documenting was 100% manual process, right? A template I followed. I would do a lot of copying and pasting into this document. And what I found with this tool is it took and automated about 90% of that process. So huge time savings for me. So I just want to kind of do a quick demo and kind of show you guys how the tool works a little bit through some screenshots. So first, why do you document your dashboard? Creating documentation, like I said, is one of the worst parts of any role, but it is a necessary thing that you need to do to not only help yourself in the future, if you need to pick back something up, do enhancements to things, help you kind of remember some things, but it also helps and decreases time in reverse engineering of things you may be taking over. And you need it really for two purposes. One purpose is for audit purposes. Most companies have some kind of process or policy in place where documentation has to be there. So it is a good practice to get that documentation in place sooner than later, so that way you don't have to wait until a failed audit to get that in place. And then just the big thing is decrease time in reverse engineering, because there's going to be times where, whether it's temporarily or permanently, that you have to take over something, a dashboard from somebody. And without having that documentation, it can take an exorbitant amount of time just to get a basic understanding of what's going on in maybe a very simple dashboard. And when you have the proper documentation in place, it could take that time from, let's say, 1 week down to maybe 1 hour. So very important to have that in place from a reverse engineering perspective. How do you document your dashboard? There's a few different ways you can do it. It just depends on whether you're doing it manually or using an automated tool like RapidDocs. So it depends on which way you want to go. But if you're doing it from a manual standpoint, any word processing software will work that you want to use to document all that. So whether you're doing it manually or automatically creating it, there's a few things you need to kind of keep in mind as you're doing it. So you want to make sure you have the proper level of detail in your document. So are you document this for a developer, or are you documenting for a user? And what's the complexity of detail you want to have in there? So you want to make sure you're capturing the right developer level and the right dashboard complexity. You want to make sure it has a table of contents in it. There was some documentation I created probably about 7-8 years ago, to where, and I used the RapidDocs tool to do it. That documentation that was generated was about 250 pages. And if there's people, and if your user base for this document, let's say they maybe only want to look at, okay, your data source section, or they only want to look at your calculator field section, you don't want to have them scroll through 150 pages just to get to that section of data. So it's definitely a good idea to have a table of contents in there for them to easily navigate to the sections that they want. You want to make sure you're using a standard font type and size in your documentation, pretty much in line with what you would for a dashboard. Normally that'd be like Arial or Calibrian, like 11 or 12 font size. And then you want to make sure it's in an easily accessible location, whether that's on SharePoint, a shared drive, just some file location that's going to be easily accessible to your intended user base for the documentation. All right, so now that we know why you should document your dashboards and how you should do that, what should be in your documentation? There's 10 key elements that you should really think about having in your documentation template, or just document in general, that are going to be some core things for reverse engineering, or even if you're just trying to want to get a review on a later date. First thing is you want to have some summary details in there. This is going to have high-level information, especially around your business details such as business owner, technology owner, summary, statistics, etc. Next, you want to have some access information. So you want to have any information on the security setup of your dashboard. So ADs that are tied to it, maybe you have a mapping document that's mapping out your dashboards to your AD groups, approvers, things like that. So you want to make sure you have that as part of your documentation template. Purpose of the dashboard. So what is the business description of your dashboard? Some people may not have access to be able to go out and maybe see the portal that they can access to that has that information. So it's a good idea to kind of have a purpose of your dashboard in the documentation template. Data sources, the underlying thing that all of our dashboards are built on top of. You want to have information on the data sources that are being used to supply the data to your dashboard. And with a lot of these sections, as we get into later slides, I'll show you the specific things related to these sections that will be in there. Available filters. So what are all the filters available for use in your dashboard? And these can be global filters, normal filters, view specific filters. You want to make sure you're capturing the information on those. Any predefined filters, so any filters you're not making available to your users, but you're using to kind of filter the data before the fact, you definitely want to call that out in your documentation as well. Dashboard illustrations. So these are your screenshots for the dashboard. Again, these come in handy when somebody who's maybe just starting doesn't have immediate access to your dashboard through Tableau Server or Tableau Cloud. You want to have a way for them to easily get a feeling for the data in the dashboard and the look and feel. So having screenshots in the documentation is going to be good. Parameters, so any parameters you're using in the dashboard, having some information around the parameters being used. Number 9, the calculated fields. This is probably the biggest plus I see for having the documentation in there. Having a calculated field section is key, especially to be able, if you're using questions on how is this calculated or that calculated, sometimes you have to go into your workbooks, and sometimes calculations can be embedded 3-4 levels deep. So it's good to have a calculated field section, all that information consolidated in one section, so you can easily go in, look up the calculated field name, pull out all the calculations, and be able to easily see also what calculations are embedded in these other calculations. And these, and this again can be based on other calculated fields or actual fields that are contained in the physical data source itself. And then finally, you want to have information on the actual tables and fields that are being used directly inside of your dashboard. So these could be coming from a database system like Oracle, Snowflake, something like that, or it could be just Excel based or document based. So an Excel report, what's the tabs being used, what's the fields in those tabs and things like that. So you want to have all that captured in your tables and fields section. All right. So now we're going to dive into each of the sections I just talked about, and specifically what in those sections should you be looking to capture in there. So first, we're going to look at the summary details section. So first thing you want to make sure is you want to definitely have the dashboard name in there. So that's going to be the business name of your dashboard. Who's the dashboard owner and developer? So, and this can be, you can have it tracked both from a business perspective as well as the technology perspective. Who's the business owner and the line of business that it's in. So you definitely want to capture who's your contact on the business side for those kind of stakeholder questions or stakeholder requirements that you may need to fine tune, or if there's any enhancements you need to do, who to reach out to from that perspective. What's the refresh frequency? So what's the time frame of your data source update? And this is, you'll see a spot in here where we've got dashboard frequency as well, but right now we're just talking about the actual refresh frequency of the data. So what's the time frame of the data source? Change ID. Normally in a Controls environment, there's going to be a evergreen ID or a change ID assigned that's going to be used to track any of the dashboard changes. You want to make sure you have that change ID or ticket number in there just for easy lookup and of all the historical changes that have been made. When was the production go live date? So just having the date when the dashboard went live, just from a reference standpoint. So in case you need to do kind of in the future to see if the dashboard is still valid, things like that, you can go to this document and just see how long it's actually been out there and kind of gauge your time frame as to when you want to kind of revisit. Is the dashboard still valid? Is it still useful? Things like that. The dashboard URL. So what's the production link of the dashboard? You want to have just an easy way to access the dashboard from the documentation itself without having to kind of go through any other means. And then finally, the documentation URL. So the link to where this documentation would be, as well as all other related documentation, whether it's a BRD, wireframes, things like that. You want to have that documentation link in the document as well, so somebody can easily go out and see where all the related documentation. All right, number 2, access. This is going to have all the security information related to your dashboard, and you can do it one of 2 ways. You can either list all the roles that have the dashboard in there. I would not recommend putting any of the user IDs or anything in there, but you can list out all the roles that have access to your dashboard. Or in the case that I like to do, I keep a mapping document of, okay, here's all the dashboards we have in our environment. Here's all the Active Directory groups that are linked, that are mapped to those dashboards. And then here's all the approvers for those different Active Directory groups. I keep that in a centralized Excel file. And then I just have a standard paragraph in my documentation, all that documentation at the end. And then I have that dashboard. Or I'm sorry, not to that dashboard, but to that file. And then number 3, purpose of the dashboard. Then again, have your description. Should describe the business case for the dashboard, and it can be as little as a few sentences, or it can be an entire paragraph. So this should be defined by your stakeholders, and I would just take that and include that in your documentation. Number 4, your data source. This is going to have all the information. Your source data should contain the following. So 1, what's the data source name? So again, the name of the data source being used. What's the data source description? So give a description of what the data is that's contained in that data source. Is it a historical data? Is it aggregate data, sales data, retail data, things like that. So you just want to have a pretty good description of what's contained in the data source that you're using. What's the date frame? So what's the time frame of the data? Is it 1, 2 years, 6 months, so on? Just kind of documenting what's the time frame of the data that you're keeping in the data source. What's the refresh frequency? Again, is the data updated daily, monthly, weekly? That refresh frequency. What's the database? So what's the database or the source file that the data is contained in? Is it an Oracle database? Is it SQL Server? Is it an Excel file? Databricks, anything like that. So just calling out what database that you're pulling the source data from. Queries. You can take those, put those in a Word document or Notepad and embed them in this section in the document. Or Prep or Alteryx is another tool. What I've done in my documentation is I've just embedded that actual workflow in the tool itself. So that was to the desktop tools for either one of those. They can easily bring up that workflow and go into those workflows and the various tools in those workflows where they can view the queries being used in there. So either way you can go. I would say and if you're using a workflow tool, I would say it's probably best to just embed the workflow in there. But if it's just maybe a query you're using that's maybe embedded in the Tableau workbook itself, just maybe take that, put that in a Notepad or Word document and just embed that as an object in your documentation. Join. What are the joins being used to connect the data together through the various tables? And again, if you're embedding the workflows, you really don't need to have some of these sections. You can get all that information just by looking at the workflow. But in the cases where that's not easily discernible, I would say you have a join section in there. And this is where I was calling out just embedding the data workflow, Alteryx Tableau prep. You can do that instead of manually. And then just make sure those workflows are documented thoroughly through annotations or comments. So that way it can serve as a metadata dictionary and you can get any of the info you need and can be easily retrieved. Next, the available filters. This section is just going to list out all the filters that you're making available to your users to be able, like quick filters, normal filters, things like that, that you're going to allow them to filter the data on. If there are just filters specific to certain tabs or views, then you want to call that out and that make sure if it's not clear from the name itself, what that filter is doing, just provide a brief description of what that filter is. And then same with the pre-done filters. This is on the opposite. This is going to be all the filters that you're not making available. So everything that you're either doing on the data source level or maybe in a worksheet behind the scenes, but you're not making it viewable to the user. You definitely want to call those out as well because those are important from if you're applying row levels, doing initial exclusion of the data. And again, same thing applies here. Call those out if they're only available for certain tabs or views. And if it's not clear by the name, again, provide a description for the name. Dashboard illustrations. Again, this is just going to be screenshots of your dashboard. This is going to allow the person to understand the look and feel of the dashboard without actually having to go out and look at the dashboard, especially if they don't have access to it yet. For your parameters, this is going to list out all the parameters being used. And should contain, okay, the parameter, what's the name of the parameter, what's the data type of the parameter, so string, float, data, etc., date, etc. What's the default value, so you want to log what's the initial value that the parameter should be set to, and what are the list of possible values the user can select, so that way they can just get a good understanding of your parameters and things that should be in there. All right, so calculated fields. This again is, I think this and the tables and field section you see here, to me are probably the biggest pieces of information and may consume up the most space in your document. They are definitely what I consider the most essential pieces because we have to understand what's the data source, but calculated fields are sometimes the bones that hold things together and are necessary for all the transformations that need to be done. So you want to make sure you have that in here. And I can speak from experience. The reason I started looking for an automated tool is because I was trying to document a dashboard and it had over 150 calculated fields in it. And that alone just took me a week's worth of time just to copy and paste in my documentation template. So very time consuming, very tedious. And at that point, it's like, there's got to be a better way to do this. So that's why I started looking. So in the calculated field section, you want to have the actual name of the calculation. Is it a dimension or a measure? What's the data type, again, string, float, data, etc. What's the formula? So this is the code for the calculation. So if it's a manual template, you're going to want to just copy and paste the code out of the Tableau workbook. The Rapid Docs tool I show you is going to pull that information in just by reading the XML, so it will get put in those fields. And then what's the data source name? So where is the calculation coming from? It doesn't really do any good to have the calculated field documented if you don't know what data source to look at to get that information, especially if you have to make enhancements to the data source or maybe have to make a modification or an update to the calculation, you need to know what data source to go to get that information. For your tables and fields, it's very similar. Again, you want to have the field name. Is it a dimension or a measure? What's the data type? What's the actual table name? So what's the physical table name that the field is coming from? And then what's the data source name? So again, back to, especially if you have to troubleshoot any data issues that are not really related to calculations, but maybe you're missing data or the data has been loaded inaccurately into the database, you want to know what's the table to go to and what's the actual column name in that table to go to for that information. Okay, so now we've kind of gone through all of the stuff to do from a manual creation or use of a tool to automate the creation and what should be in there. and the different sections. So what I'd like to show you now is do a brief little demo of a tool called RapidDocs, which is the automated tool I found. And like I mentioned earlier, took my 100% manual process and automated about 85% of it. There's still some manual pieces I have to pull in, and I'll call that out when I bring up the sample output that it generates. But first, I just want to kind of give you a little intro for it, and then show you a few screenshots of the tool itself. So what is RapidDocs? It generates thorough and customized dashboard documentation. It can also generate data documentation as well as Tableau prep flow documentation, and it also generates documentation for Power BI as well. That's a bad word. We won't talk about that here, but that's another tool that it accommodates as far as a documentation standpoint. There's no scripting or coding required to generate the documentation. It's very simple, and you guys will see this. You just upload the Tableau workbook data source file or prep flow, follow a few prompts, and it will generate documentation for you in about 15 to 20 seconds, depending on how big the flows or the dashboards are. And it only accesses the metadata, and everything is done locally on your computer. So it only accesses the metadata in relation to the XML for what you're feeding into it. It is fully customizable. You can pick and choose what sections you want to include, the order of those sections. And there's a lot of very customizable stuff that you can tell it to include or not include. You can upload custom dashboard screenshots, or you can use the workbook thumbnails. So you can either take your own screenshots. I normally just use the workbook thumbnails that are generated from Tableau Desktop, and you can output it into 5 different formats. You can output it into Word, Excel, CSV, PDF, and HTML formats. So you got a little bit of a range of outputs that you can put it in, so whatever fits best for you from a consumption. There is a cost. The licenses cover all the features and email support, and you can get subscriptions per user on a per user basis, and you can get them on either a monthly, yearly, or lifetime basis. I had the lifetime license before, which $1,000 upfront cost for the first year, and then it's just a recurring $200 cost afterwards for maintenance and upgrade subscriptions starting with the second year. But just keep in mind, if this is the route you want to go, there is a licensing cost to it. All right, so we'll start out with a little bit of the demo here. So the first time you see the tool, your email and password that you created during sign up, so it can verify the license type. You only have to do that once, and it'll auto log you in after that. And then step 1 is you're going to pick a file to upload. You can upload either a .twb or twbx file. It'll take all those, and like you see here, it can also take Tableau prep flows, Tableau data source files, and Power BI desktop files. So those are the 4 file types it can take. And then once the file is uploaded, you're just going to click continue to proceed to the customization piece. Step 2, you can enter in any like footer information you want to put in there. You can either have a footer or not have a footer, but if there's any background information you want to put in, like company name, description, who was developed by, requested by, things like that, audience, you can put all that information in here, or you can just leave it blank and hit the next button. Next is you want to check what dashboards and worksheets you want to include. So this, again, is going to read through your Tableau workbook and be able to pull out all of your dashboard pages, all your worksheet pages, and you can pick and choose which one of those you want to include in your documentation. So you're going to pick that and then hit the next button. Then number 4, you can accept to use the thumbnails generated by Tableau workbook, or you can upload a PDF with all the images and then click next to include what you want to include for your screenshots. And then finally, this is where it's like the fully customizable point. You're going to check what sections you want to include, and you can also reorder the placement of sections if needed. This is from an older version that was there a few years ago, like 10.0. There's a newer version right now, which you can also pick and choose for the stuff that generates tables, like the calculated field section, what columns you want to include in that table. There's specifically in that it generates, okay, here's the actual name you gave the calculation, and here's the default Tableau. Here's the default name Tableau gave it. I've never once used the default Tableau name, so you can uncheck that box to exclude that column out of the table that's being generated. And then finally, once you have all that information, you can pick and choose your format. You'll just pick which format you want to put it on. It'll open up a save box where you can save it off. And there you go. So let me real quick here before we kind of wrap things up. Let me kind of show you sample documentation here. Okay, so what you see here is a sample is documentation generated by the tool. This was a newer feature of the version 10 that you saw the screenshots on. It generates a table of contents for you. And very key, especially if you've got, like I talked about earlier, like a 250-page document, you want to be able to easily go in and get to the section you want. So it generates the table of contents and creates the bookmarks for you to get to those specific sections. There are sections of the report I still put in manually that I called on the template. So the things you see in here in green are the things that I've manually added in here. This is where I said it automated about 85%, but there's still some key things I think are important that should be added in manually. So purpose of the report, again, manual added in here. Details in here. Again, this is all manual entry from my point. This table here, the summary stats, the RapidDocs tool generated automatically. Get summary count of the number of dashboards, number of worksheets, data sources, filters, calculated fields, etc. Does all that summarization and puts that in the documentation for you. Access column here. Again, this is a standard paragraph I put in with just a link to my access roles document right here. Pretty much standard, just copy and paste into any of the documentation that I have. It does capture the filters in some of the different sections, but for my purpose, I don't like the way it captured the quick filters and things. So I just did a customized available filters and predefined filter section to where, okay, I've just got bulleted points here, and this is based right now on the different dashboard tabs I have in the workbook. So you'll see here, I've got the names here, and where it was not pretty specific what the filter was, I did add a little hyphenated description here to kind of point out what that filter is for. And there's only one part of the data source section that I put in a customizable, just a standard paragraph, and you'll see here where I embedded an Alteryx workflow, and then I also have another document in here which kind of is the refresh schedule of all of our Alteryx work, just embedded it. Otherwise, all the tables and things you see here are generated by the tool. So you see the tables and field section in here, gives you data source, table name, field name, what's a remote field name, data type, is it used, is it contained in a folder, dimension or measure, and is from a table and field perspective.
Sorry, Scott, is it possible to zoom that in, or are you deliberately making it zoomed out?
No,
that's okay. No, I wasn't sure which way it was.
Yeah, no, I can zoom it in.
I just didn't know how much stuff was confidential.
No, none of this is confidential. This is all based off a workbook that I anonymized. There's no data in here. This is all just XML data from the workbook.
Easy, thank you.
So again, back up to the field section. So this is all again generated from the RapidDocs tool itself. So you see a lot of valuable information from a tables and fields perspective. And then when you get down to the actual calculated field section, you have your calculated field name. This now in the newer version, you can choose to exclude this column, which is the default field name. When I'm doing a lot of my workbooks, I do a lot of copying and pasting of calculations, and then I just kind of update them because they may be a slight change, maybe a very similar calculation, but just a slight change. But by default, Tableau will give it some weird names like calculation this or underscore copy to, things like. Real no need for this. So I can, in the newer version, you can choose to keep this column out of the table. Again, the data source name here, here's of it. This is the formula. So it will pull in based on the XML, the calculation out of the Tableau workbook and put it in the table itself. And again, is it used? Is it in a folder? And is it a dimension or a measure? Then again, you've got your parameters here. Like I mentioned earlier, it's got all the sections related to the parameters I talked about earlier. It will also bring in sets as well. You can have it include or exclude sets. So it'll pretty much anything you have defined in the data pane, it will bring in, and it'll bring in groups as well. So sets, groups, anything like that, it can bring in, and you can have those documented. Then it goes into doing specific documentation on the dashboards. So this is where it will bring in your screenshot of the dashboard. It will give you some summary stats for that dashboard page. It will give you, okay, what worksheets are used in this dashboard page. So you can tell with those parameters used on it. And then here's where it has the quick filters applied, but I didn't like this too much. So that's why I just have an available filter section at the very top. But this is another way where you can it will catalog, okay, here's all the quick filters used on the dashboard page. And document any of the actions that are on the dashboard page as well. So it will do that for every dashboard page you have in here. Then once you have all those, it goes into your actual worksheets, and it will do a very similar thing. It'll give you the worksheet name, what is the dashboard the worksheet is used in. Here's all the quick filters being applied on the worksheet. Here's all the calculated fields being used in that worksheet. It can also include things like, okay, what's on the column shelf? What are the marks being used? All those things. I didn't include those in here because I feel they weren't needed, but you can capture all that as well. And then there's also a piece where you can include like a mapping where it can map. It does a illustrative mapping of your works to your different dashboard pages. I think it also does a mapping of data sources to the worksheets as well. So you can include all that as well in the documentation. Okay, so to wrap it up here. So we three main things we talked about today is just the importance of documentation. Want to do it for audit purposes and just to avoid all that excessive time in reverse engineering and review. How you document it, make sure you have a table of contents, use kind of a standard font type and size, know your audience so that way you're creating it at the right level for the audience, and then just what you should have in here. And I list out here, okay, here's just all the sections you should have in there, from summary details to access, purpose, data source, etc. So those are the kind of key things to kind of have in your documentation. So thank you all for your time. I hope this was beneficial and helps make your lives easier and gives you a better head start on creating documentation. And with that, I will open it up to any questions.
Hey Scott, hi, I'm on this side. Thanks for this valuable information that you have shared. We were not aware of this tool. Definitely helpful. My quick question here. So some of the times we work for the clients, their data is critical or sensitive in nature related to banking, insurance stuff. So what will be the difference in documentation if we upload a TWB file or TWBX file?
Okay, I'm sorry. Say the question again.
So my question here is, so you mentioned we can upload either TWB file or TWBX file.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So if we are uploading only TWB file, which will not contain any data source information, the actual data information, what will be the difference in documentation if we upload TWB file instead of TWBX?
I'm not exactly sure. What I can tell you is it will read the XML. So I think it will document whatever the XML is in the workbook. So it may just document like going out to some of the different things. I have not tried that piece. So, or no, I take that back. It should still document all that information because the difference between a .twbx file and a .twb file is it just TWBX will actually have the data contained in the package workbook, where TWB file will not, but both of them together still have the XML for the metadata that like your field definitions, calculated field formulas, all that stuff. All those should still be the same between both. And what I showed you was based on a .twb file that I remember now.
Okay.
So if the data is I don't think you should see it.
Sorry. So if the data is sensitive nature, it's good to upload only TWB file, yeah?
I think you can do either because it's not going, like I said, it's just reading the metadata. It's not reading any of the actual data itself. It's just looking at the workbook you're updating and reading the XML for that workbook. So it should not be pulling in reading any of the data values.
Makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
And didn't you say before it's an application that installs on your computer, so the data's not going anywhere?
Yes.
It's you're installing RapidDocs locally, and then it's reading files locally.
Yes.
It's not as if you're actually sending, confidential data to an external site. It runs locally on your computer.
Yeah. The only thing it's transmitting, the only data that it transmits is when you sign up and get a license, when you sign up with your email and login, that's the only data that transfers to their site just to validate your life. That's the only data sent. Other than that, everything is local to your computer.
Yep.
Makes sense. Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Scott, thanks a lot.
You're right. Jacob was asking whether it actually documents things like action filters, dynamic zone visibility, sheet swapping, etc.
I wasn't asking specifically about that. It was early in Scott's presentation. He had the top 10 of kind of things to document, and kind of action filters, dashboard filters. Dashboard action filters, dynamic zone visibility and stuff wasn't really mentioned there. But I know that when he showed the RapidDocs output, it did have detail about dashboard filters.
Yeah, I do apologize because it is a 2-year-old presentation, and I haven't revisited it a lot since then. But I would say those definitely could be included in there as well. The action filters, anything related to dynamic zone visibility, I think would be good to have in there as well. And I think would fall under similar sections like you have documented parameters, filters, things like that. So yeah, I think those would be good to have in there. I do believe the current version, like I said, I haven't had a chance to play around with the newer version yet, just because my license had expired with it. But I do believe they have some things in the current version to where it'll pull out the dynamic zone visibility stuff and document some of that too. But I can kind of come back to you on that once I take a better look into it. But I know they're constantly trying to stay in line with the latest versions. So I think they do releases at least once every couple months, I believe, would kind of address some of those issues. And if it's not there, I think they consider me a power user. So if I don't see it's there, probably put in the request and they can do some thinking on how to get that as part of the tool going forward. Because I do see a lot of benefit with the tool, at least myself, from saving me time and work. I know there's other tools out there to where people have created like, I think they've created maybe like Alteryx workflows that will read the XML, or some other tools that will read that. I have seen some of those tools, but to me, RapidDocs has the best way of organizing the data and putting it in a good format. From a structure standpoint, the other ones will maybe do the same thing, but I just find the format that came out wasn't as crisp as what I liked it to be. So that's why I was willing to kind of bring it to my leadership's attention to bring it in there. And I have been able to bring this as a tool into Chase. It took me a while to get it in there, but I was able to go through what I needed to from a risk perspective and get it as an acceptable tool that can be requested through our systems internally.
And Evelyn asked, how hard was it for learning this tool, and do users need access to the tool or only the end documents that you create?
It was not hard to learn the tool. They do offer, I think, a 7-day or a 14-day free trial for anybody that wants to go out and play around with it themselves. You can get it, you can play around with the free trial. And that's how I learned it. I just went out, I signed up for the tool, and then I just went around, uploaded a workbook, and then I just played around with the different customizations in the tool to kind of see what was possible, what wasn't. So very easy from my perspective to learn. And no, users do not need to have access in the tool to get them the documentation. For whoever has the license, they would use the tool to create the documentation. Then you just put that documentation out, like I mentioned early in the presentation, to a easily accessible location for the end users to, whether it's other developers, whether it's business users. You just want to make sure you put that out in an easily accessible location that they can get access to what you're producing for them through the tool.
Easy. I think that's the end of the questions. So there's Scott's contact details, so LinkedIn and Tableau Public. Depends on what's on. You were joking about your Tableau Public before, but that's fine. My Tableau Public's about the same way. And just on to the next question of Fast 5. Oh, so these questions are not supplied by Viraj. I missed that in changing the deck for today. But again, 5 simple questions, simple answers. It's all personal preference. If the questions get too hard, feel free to pass. I think question 5 was a bit of a challenge today, but if you don't feel comfortable and you want to pass, that's fine as well.
Okay.
So question 1, what's your go-to color palette or visual style and why?
Well, I am a visually impaired person, so my color palette to go to is always the colorblind palette. Mm-hmm. It's the most accessible. I think being that I'm visually impaired, I pay a lot more attention to detail, and having screen magnification software helps as well. Being able to zoom in and kind of see more of those distinct changes. So that is normally my default to go to, but again, at the end of the day, that may be what you want. It's not always necessarily a reality. You have to, maybe there's a branding color palette you have to use. A lot of times I have to use what's dictated to me, but if I have my own personal choice, it would be the default colorblind palette that's in Tableau.
Awesome, good. And how has Tableau influenced the way you think about data or data?
I think just here it's been recently, just from the perspective of, especially with Tableau Cloud and all the new features that are only available on Tableau Cloud, whether it's native to cloud like Tableau Pulse, or you've got stuff behind like Tableau Plus as it relates to generative AI and things like that. It just really gets me to thinking, and I'm very passionate about visualizing data, trying to figure out how to visualize data I've never worked with before. That's been kind of one of the key aspects I've put into any role that I've had within the bank. And I'm on my 6th team now and 12 years in the bank. And every one of those roles, I've started working with a data set I've never worked with before. So figuring out how to visualize that data in conjunction with taking advantage of some of the new options to be able to visualize the data, that really gets me to thinking in relation to what I know to be best practices and standards and things like that. And how can I make it, maybe snazz it up a little bit, but I never want to sacrifice flashy for functionality, because at that point, if you have things get too flashy, users won't use the dashboard and they'll go to whatever means they were getting the data from before. So I try to think about the new features with what I know to be with best practices. And I've been doing a lot from a strategy perspective now, so I haven't done a lot of development here recently, but I try to just take that mindset into whether it's strategically thinking about a dashboard project or whether I'm the one actually doing the development as well.
Yep, for sure. And how has your approach to building dashboards changed since you first started using Tableau?
Well, I would say not so much when I first started with Tableau, but just in general. I've been doing this almost 20 years. And the first like 6.5 years of my career, I used Oracle's tool before I was even exposed to dashboards. And I started learning best practices with the books that Stephen Few put out there. And I kind of use those as a guide, but a lot of my early dashboards were chart, and then here's the corresponding table that went with the chart. And just a lot of dashboards that had that. And for a good early portion of my career, I thought that was a good practice to use. And then I found out, well, that's very redundant, because a lot of what you have in the table, you're showcasing in the chart itself. And I would have grid lines in the table. And I wouldn't be using font sizes and things properly. I would bold a lot of stuff. So as I've gone through my career, and especially with Tableau, when I first started learning Tableau, and there would be white papers out there about Tableau best practices and dashboard best practices, it really made me kind of refine my thinking and kind of learn the skills needed to just from a very simple perspective, like, okay, if everything stands out, learning screen placement, things like that, and just to make sure you're telling your story to the best of your ability, and you're making sure that the things that you want to get noticed get noticed. So Tableau really kind of started catapulting that learning when I first started learning it, to where right now a lot of what I've learned then is ingrained into my head, and I don't have to put a second thought to it.
But it's the same as what Andy and I were saying last week, was best practice changes over the years as well.
Yes.
So what was really cool 20 years ago, just it doesn't work these days because things have changed and modernized.
Yeah, and I always try to stay up to speed on best practices because, yeah, I agree. What was best practice today may not be tomorrow. So you definitely have to be abreast of that. And maybe if you can't change what you need to right away, bring it to somebody's attention that can maybe help get that decision made faster, because you always want to be, you don't want your dashboards going stale or becoming ineffective. So you definitely want to try to be in line with whatever the current best practices are. And now, that being said, I've never built a dashboard that's hit 100% of best practices. I don't think that's realistic, just from a business requirement standpoint, because users are used to seeing certain things and certain patterns, and that's what they want to continue to see. But if you can build to a majority of them, then I think you'll be successful.
Yep, cool. And what's the most creative or unusual use of Tableau you've seen or built yourself?
Well, I think for me, what's the most creative use of Tableau I've done is like the Star Trek dashboards I talked about that I built last year for the TV and Data Plus Movies challenges. That was my first foray into building anything outside of business dashboards. And realizing doing that, I've got a lot more with color palettes, with design choices, just basically design choices in general, to where I was experimenting with, like in the first one that I have out there right now, which is a bad design, but I've got a lot of bad colors in my first Star Trek dashboard because I used uniform colors. I used like the gold as a background color with red on top of red font to symbolize the command color, and just realizing that maybe what looked good at first is not looking good right now. But it really helped me kind of explore my creativity to where I fine-tuned that a little bit, and where I went into doing my second dashboard where I did things on the Star Trek ratings, to where I was able to incorporate a lot more of accessibility features. So yeah, of course, I brought in IMDb images, used those as kind of navigation buttons, but putting some accessibility stuff so users would know, okay, here's what you selected. Being able to use some of the default shapes in Tableau. So instead of using normal dots for my line charts, I'm using stars, and being able to be creative to make things look like constellations and things like that. So for me, that's the most creative I've been, because I would never be able to do that to that extent in a business dashboard.
Mm-hmm. Pretty cool. And the last question, I think, is, have you ever disagreed with a stakeholder about what should be shown, and how did you resolve it?
I can answer this very easily in my current situation. In the current team that I'm on, probably about 30% of our dashboards are nothing but tables in them, and they're not formatted. They're just not a good user experience from a alignment standpoint, formatting. And this has not only happened in my current role, but I've had it happen in other roles where I've gone then and tried to fight that fight with my own leadership, with my own stakeholders, to try to convince them to say, hey, tables are for a better tool like business objects or Cognos or something that's more tabular report related. And let's see what we can do to take the data in the visual format. Because if you're saying you can see trends in tabular data, show me how quickly you can get the trend you're wanting to see. Because we know just looking at a table of numbers, it's going to be hard to see. So I've tried to fight that fight, and to this day, I've not been able to resolve it, because users are, everybody comes from an Excel mentality. So users are stuck, I think, right now in that Excel mentality, and it's very hard to kind of push them out of it sometimes. So I think the biggest learning I've got is I know when to kind of keep pushing the envelope, and when it gets to a point to where I know I'm not going to get any traction, then I just kind of say, okay, I've fought as much as I can fight. It's not going to go any further. So I then just kind of move on to something else that I may have a better chance of kind of winning the argument over.
Yep, definitely. I think we all have that fight at some point as well. It's just, you know, how do you resolve it and how do you get around it?
Yep.
Yep, and that was the 5, so that's awesome. Thank you. So the next meeting is Seku, which is next week at around the same time. You've got to take off a few hours. We're sort of getting into this, you know, summertime for us, but wintertime for the Northern Hemisphere. So it's October 15 for anyone in Australia, 7 a.m. in Sydney. Your time changes as you go around the country. October 14th for almost every other place in the world. But talking about rapid insights into DataFam's best and taking some moments and highlights from the podcast. So that should be very interesting as well. But and also this recording and all the other recordings and a whole heap of other online tugs as well is on Team DataFam, the YouTube channel. If you can't watch it on YouTube, then there's Spotify and Apple podcasts as well. And as I said, if you need to present anything at all that's Tableau related, some people are starting to think about their TC26 presentations already. If you want to run through those, if you want to repeat, if you want to just present because you want to present, even if you want to find someone else and nominate them to present, email me at team.datafam@gmail.com. We'll find a slot. There's always sessions. It's pretty easy to do. But again, thank you, Scott, for your time today. It was really awesome to see that. There's a few other things in the chat, I think. Oh, there's DMs coming through. So there's other people asking about different things, but all that's in the recording. The recording will be up on YouTube in a few days. Yeah, go and share the recording as well when it's up there. There's also a bit of comment about, you know, creating custom palettes and things like that. So there's a wide variety of tools out there. In the latest version of Tableau, you can even create your custom palette in Tableau. If I'm trying to remember Andy's presentation on that. But yeah, good to see. Thank you.
And if anybody wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn to just talk about anything related to documentation or Rapid Docs, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and happy to have that conversation.
Any other questions?
No, good content. Thanks, Scott.
Easy. Okay,
Right,
we'll wrap it up there, guys. Have a good day.
Ciao. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.